Hello and welcome to the Broken Sword. Today we are looking at what the dwarven race were doing both during and after the Lord of the Rings.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
So with the new channel we are yet to have a video based on the dwarves, and over the last couple of years my love for the dwarven race has grown and grown. So today I really wanted to go back, have a look at just what they were up to and cover that all for you. So let's just get into it. Now, not long before the events that take place in The Lord of the Rings, we have the events of The Hobbit, where we meet Thorin and his company and travel with them on the quest of Erebor. I won't go into much detail on this today, but if you would like us to look at a video on the War of the Dwarves and Orcs, as well as what happened to the Dwarves of Thorin's company after The Hobbit, then please let me know that in the comments below. But anyway, as we move on from this time, Dane Ironfoot of the Iron Hills becomes king under the mountain after Thorin Oakenshield fell. Balin from Thorin's company took his own quest to reclaim the ancient realm of Moria, but only 5 years after leaving Erebor, Balin falls and all the dwarven colony he set up there is destroyed. So over time we eventually reach the year 3018, and this is important because this is when the War of the Ring is said to have truly started. Sauron launches his first attack on Osgiliath, while also sending a force to attack Thranduil in Mirkwood too. So where are the dwarves, and just what are they up to at this point? Firstly, let's just make sure everyone is up to the same point in making sure everyone knows about the fathers of the dwarves. The first 7 dwarves ever created were by the Valar Aule, and they became known as the fathers to their different lines. And of these we have the Longbeards, also known as Geraintfolk, being the most popular. Then we also have the Broadbeams, the Firebeards, the Iron Fists, the Stiffbeards, the Blacklocks, and the Stonefoots. Just knowing each of their names for this moment should be enough, as by going through each line, this will help us stay clearer throughout the video. Of these, let's first look at the 4 lines that had originally gone to dwell in Rhûn, as their combined fates are considered somewhat the same. The Stonefoots and the Blacklocks were one of the original pairings, with the other pairing of the 4 to go east being the Stiffbeards and the Iron Fists. Of each of these 4 the same thing is said, albeit in very little detail, and this is mentioned during the chapter of The Shadow of the Past from the Fellowship of the Ring. There were, however, dwarves on the road in unusual numbers. The ancient east-west road ran through the Shire to its end at the Grey Havens. The dwarves had always used it on their way to their mines in the Blue Mountains. They were the hobbits' chief source of news from distant parts, if they wanted any. As a rule, dwarves said little and hobbits asked no more. But now Frodo often met strange dwarves of far countries, seeking refuge in the west. They were troubled, and some spoke in whispers of the enemy and of the land of Mordor. So of these we can gather that when the War of the Ring began to cast a shadow over their land, they did one of 3 things. They either fled to the western parts of Middle-earth, meaning some would have been the dwarves that Frodo had the chance to meet when he still lived at Bag End, albeit we have no idea which of these it could have been. Or 2, they fell to the lair of Sauron and fought on his side, although this option is very unlikely as well, as for the most part, so few dwarves actually fought on his side. Or 3, they stayed in their mansions and died out, keeping themselves to themselves, not wanting to get involved in the troubles of others, as they were more than happy to just mine away for any gems and treasures that they could find, with no cares for what was going on in the outside world. So, even though we cannot have a definitive answer of these 3 lines, we can be quite certain that they played little real impact on the end events, as their names are barely written about at all. And this is where we move on to the other lines now, as we still have the Longbeards, Broadbeams and Firebeards to look at. The Longbeards, or Geraintfolk, were the only line to awaken alone, so let's look at the other final pair first in the Broadbeams and the Firebeards. This pair originally awoke in the Blue Mountains and remained here for the majority of their histories, coming to build the 2 great dwarven cities of Nogrod and Belegost in the days before the War of Wrath. Despite these cities eventually getting destroyed, there still remain some members of their lines on the eastern side of the Blue Mountains for many years afterwards. However, just like the previous two sets of pairs, there is so little ever written and revealed about them that we will never really know exactly what their true involvement was during the War of the Ring. But again, with the lack of information ever given, we can only assume that that in turn means that their impact on anything was the same. Very little. Then finally we move on to the last of the lines with the group that are most well known to the readers and fans of Tolkien, and that is the Longbeards, or best known as Durin's folk. This is the line of the dwarves that held the members that we have all become most accustomed to seeing or hearing about, with the likes of Durin, Thorin, Balin, Dane Ironfoot, Gimli, amongst others as well. After the Battle of the Five Armies in The Hobbit, Durin's folk's strength grew and grew in the reclaimed Erebor under Dane Ironfoot, but war was brought to their doorstep. Sauron had not just sent armies to attack the places close to him, like Minas Tirith. No, he also sent armies north to attack not just these lands, but also the lands where the elves dwelt as well. This part of the War of the Ring became known as the Battle of Dale, and the defences were led, of course, by King Dane, along with King Brand of Dale. The force that had been sent by Sauron was made up of vast amounts of Easterlings, and this army forced the men of Dale and the dwarves back to the gates of Erebor, but no further yet. That is, until after they had fought before the gate of Erebor for 3 days, King Dane was slain as he had stood over the body of his fallen ally and friend, King Brand, and he would not retreat from that spot. However, with both kings having been killed, the remaining men and dwarves were finally forced to retreat back into the Lonely Mountain. And here, they managed to hold out the siege until news of victory in the south came, as, with that news, the morale of the Easterlings evaporated away, and so the forces of good rallied and drove them back. So, that is what the majority of what Durin's folk were doing, but of course, we cannot forget to mention the other member of this line too, and that is of course Gimli, son of Gloin. But I feel little need to go into the details of what he did, for obvious reasons. So therefore, now that the goings-on of the dwarves during the War of the Ring have been covered, let's look at what happened to this hearty race after Sauron had finally been defeated, and I feel it just makes sense to go through them in the same order like we just did. So again, let's start with the 4 lines that had originally gone and dwelt in the east, the Stonefoots and the Blacklocks, along with the Stiffbeards and the Ironfists. And this will be a very quick one, as nothing at all is written about their end fates, so we can most likely assume, like before, the last of their lines either travelled west to mix in with the likes of Durin's folk, or they simply just died out in the east. Nothing is noted of them, so we can only make these assumptions. Next we have the Broadbeams and the Firebeards again, and also again, little is written. We know some remained on the eastern side of the Blue Mountains, and that the dwarf mines were still active into the 4th Age, but their exact numbers or success here is, like a lot of this, shrouded in mystery. So once again we can only assume they slowly died out over time as their mining was ever more important to them than the continuage of their lines. So then finally we are back at Durin's folk once again. Continue on with what I was saying about the Battle of Dale. So after the victory was celebrated, Thorin the Third Stonehelm, who was the son of Dane Ironfoot, became king under the mountain, and they kept up a great relationship with the likes of King Elisar in the south, and this helped them with the rebuilding of their lands and homes and to keep them prospering well into the 4th Age. This Thorin would also have a son that would be the 6th and last reincarnation of Durin, and he accomplished great things for his race. During the 4th Age, Durin the Last would lead his folk from Erebor back to their ancestral home of Khazad-dûm, and together they restored this ancient realm where they would remain until their race would finally begin to dwindle and fail away until the days of Durin's race would truly end. But let's rewind for a second as well, as we still need to look at Gimli. After all, he was truly one of the greatest dwarves to have ever existed. After the War of the Ring, Gimli would travel with Legolas back to Fangorn Forest and Helm's Deep to see the Glittering Caves once again, which even led to him taking a group of Durin's folk from Erebor to found a colony in the Glittering Caves not long after. So, along with earning the title of Lord of the Glittering Caves, he would help rebuild the gates of Minas Tirith using a mixture of mithril and steel, as well as lending his hand to other works in both Gondor and Rohan. He would then return to settle in the Glittering Caves for many years, until the time he left once again with his great friend Legolas to go and spend some more time together. And this friendship was so important as it had a great impact on ending the rivalry between elves and dwarves that had lasted for thousands of years. It was considered as such a great thing, in fact, that Gimli became the only dwarf to ever gain the permission to sail west to the Undying Lands. And this as a feat can really just truly not be understated. So there we have it, a look at just what the race of the dwarves were up to both during and after the War of the Ring. Like I said at the beginning, I am such a big fan of looking at the histories and achievements of the dwarves. So if you would like to see more videos on this race, then please just simply like this video and leave a comment of "and my axe" in the comment section below. Since delving ever deeper into Tolkien lore, my love for the dwarves has been ever increasing, like I said, and I will admit that means that I do find it quite sad that really so little is known about their end. We can only assume that as they like to keep themselves to themselves, that they simply just continued to mine away in their homes, gather their riches and treasures until they simply died out, like all the other magical races of Middle-earth did too. So, as we have ended on a somewhat depressing note, I would like to ask a question that is a bit more positive, and that is, what is your favourite moment from all of Tolkien's histories that involves a dwarf? It could be anything at all, so please let me know yours in the comment section below. And along with that comment, please remember as well, separately comment "and my axe" if you want more videos on the dwarves in general. And now that we've reached the end of the video, I would like to also remind you all, we do not just have this channel, but we have two others as well. And they are the 6th Ranger for Power Rangers content and History of Dragon Ball for Dragon Ball content. Links to both of those channels will be in the description below if you want to watch and support us on those as well. And now to shout out our patrons. Firstly, our Divine Power tier members of Kevin, Michael, Abram, Matt and Glorfidel of Gondolin. You are all awesome. And also a big thanks to our Fire Demon tier members of Nashith, Lorenzo, Denver Steel and Gregory. As well, I cannot forget the Wizard Staff tier member of Andrew along with them. You are all true legends of the Bro Hero. Finally, if you have not already as well, please do all the great stuff, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Doing these things massively help us out to get back in favour with that YouTube algorithm, which is why I also ask for the comments too. All these simple things can just make a massive difference to us. So thank you once more if you have managed to reach the end of the video with me today, and we will see you next time on The Broken Sword.